Hey guys, in this video we will be guiding you through Heroic Upper Blackrock Spire. Keep in mind the information in the footage in this video is from beta and is subject to change. Upper Blackrock Spire is brand new for Warlords of Draenor. The Iron Horde made lots of changes when they moved in, but it looks like there are still some remnants of the previous inhabitants. You will need to clear each alcove of mobs in order to activate the runes that open the door to the first boss. For the first sets of trash, we prioritize banners over lead belchers over grunts. The grunts will throw down a banner that needs to be switched to immediately, and this will be your highest priority throughout this trash. While the banner is out, it will radiate a distress call in the form of a red circle on the ground that will continuously grow until it is eliminated. If the red circle reaches other mobs that are tucked away in the alcoves, they will engage in the fight, causing utter chaos. Lead belchers are a high priority target. These will need to be CC'd or focused down first. They will run to a nearby cannon, activating it to fight by their side. Be aware there is a pat with a lead belcher and two wargs. The wargs have a frontal cone that they channel called Frantic Mauling, which can be difficult to see but is easy to avoid because of how small it is. A useful trick we found is that if you have an engineer in your group, they can interact with the cannons, causing them to become friendly and fight by your side. The main ability you will need to watch out for from the Warcasters is Shrapnel Storm. This looks like a mage's arcane explosion that will implode on itself. You will need to move away from this before it shrinks into an explosion of shrapnel. This is easily avoided and your healers will thank you. You will need to kill all of the apprentices and deactivate all of the power conduits before you are able to engage the boss. The first boss of the instance is Orbender Gor'ashan. This fight can be very punishing if you jump off the platform at the wrong time or are too slow to move. Gor'ashan will continuously cast Blade of Steel, dealing physical damage to the tank. He will also cast Shrapnel Nova, which is similar to what you saw from the Warcasters, except he channels it on himself, dealing AoE damage to your group. On Heroic, there will be two electrified orbs called Electric Pulses that will circle around the room throughout the fight. Initially, the group will need to be positioned on the platform to avoid unnecessary damage from these orbs. When Gor'ashan begins to draw power from the conduits, you will take reduced damage based on how many conduits are active, so the DPS will need to drop down from the platform and deactivate the conduits while avoiding the orbs circling the room. On Heroic, you will initially draw from two conduits and will draw from an additional conduit each time. During this time, he also begins to cast Thunder Cacophony that will deal additional lightning damage to the party. We would advise that the healers stay up on the platform so they have an easier time healing the group. DPS should pop any personals during this time to help reduce any incoming damage while deactivating conduits. To summarize, Orbender Gor'ashan has very few abilities, but each one hits quite hard. Make sure you deactivate the conduits as quickly as possible, but don't get hit by electric pulses. The combination of the pulse with the Thunder Cacophony can quickly prove to be fatal. The trash before the next boss consists of three different types of mobs. Engineers will channel Debilitating Ray that deals shadow damage every 1 second and decreases the target's damage done. This ability needs to be interrupted. Monstrosities need to be faced away from the group due to their frontal attack called Eruption. This is telegraphed as a fire line on the ground that will deal a large amount of damage to anyone standing in it. This can easily be moved out of. The alchemists will cast Rejuvenating Serum. This cannot be interrupted, but they can be stunned. This ability applies a hot on the alchemist that can be removed or dispelled. Kyrak is the second boss of the instance. We found this fight to be a little chaotic with all the slime pools on the ground. Kyrak will start out with 2 adds. They each have 2 abilities, the first being a frontal cleave called Monstrous Swipe. This deals a moderate amount of damage to the tank, however being hit by both is pretty rough at the beginning of the fight. Their second ability is Eruption. Similar to the Trash, this is a fire line placed in front of them that needs to be avoided. We found it easier to kill both adds before switching to the boss due to the amount of damage that was being dealt to the tank by all 3. Kyrak will cast and channel Debilitating Fixation on a random target. This is to fixate on his target, dealing shadow damage every second, while decreasing movement speed and damage dealt from his target. This needs to be interrupted immediately. Throughout the fight, Kyrak will place poison puddles at players' feet, dealing nature damage every 1.5 seconds. Move out of these quickly to avoid unnecessary damage. He will also cast Rejuvenating Serum. This will heal 5% of his maximum health every 3 seconds for 30 seconds and cannot be interrupted. This needs to be removed or dispelled immediately. On Heroic, Kyrak will apply Salve of Toxic Fumes on a random target. This is a dot that will deal nature damage every 1.5 seconds to all nearby players. Be aware that there are line of sight issues, so be conscious of where you are moving. To summarize, Kyrak can be a bit rough on the pull. The 2 monstrosities need to be killed quickly to keep from killing the tank. Interrupt Debilitating Fixation and dispel Rejuvenating Serum immediately. Also make sure you're moving out with Toxic Fumes, but don't put yourself in a position where you'll have to run through lots of slime pools. The combination of the 2 will likely kill you. The Trash before the 3rd boss is fairly straightforward, but you will need to be mindful of your pulls. The initial packs we felt were easier to pull them back to avoid accidentally pulling any pats or extra groups. Dreadweavers will cast Shadow Bolt and Shadow Bolt Volley. We found it was best to interrupt the volley to reduce additional damage to the group. The Veterans will use an ability called Shield Smash. This will apply a stacking debuff on the tank that reduces their armor. Healers will need to be aware that the tank will be taking increased damage while these mobs are alive. The Black Iron Elites will charge at a random player, knocking them back. Be aware of where you were standing to avoid being knocked back into other mobs or off the ledge. They will also cast Intimidating Shout, which is an AoE fear which needs to be interrupted. Siegebreakers are the big ogres that have an enrage that can be removed, and they will cast Smash. This is a frontal cleave ability that needs to be moved out of. Summoners will cast a spell that will summon a Dreadweaver to his aid. This needs to be interrupted. Commander Tharbek is the 3rd encounter of the instance and is very similar to the old Rend Blackhand fight from the old version of Upper Blackrock Spire. The fight begins with waves of adds that you had encountered earlier in the instance, with the exception of the Vile Maws. The Vile Maw hatchlings will take flight around the room, shooting the group with a poison spit looking ability. These can be DPS down by the range, but will land periodically, allowing the melee to assist. You will want to prioritize Dreadweavers, as they will put a 50% healing debuff on the tank, but do make sure to interrupt the summoners. After 3 waves of adds, Tharbek will come down on his Sky Reaver. First, you will be dealing with the Sky Reaver's abilities. The key ability you will need to watch for while the Sky Reaver is active is his Incinerating Breath. He will breathe a cone of fire at a random target, dealing a large amount of fire damage, and apply a stacking debuff, increasing the damage taken by 100%. You will see him turn towards a player before using this ability, allowing you to start moving and avoid taking any damage. The Sky Reaver will throw out puddles of acid that will deal nature damage to anyone standing in them. These are easily avoided. When the Sky Reaver reaches 50%, Tharbek will join the fight. You will want to finish off the Sky Reaver before switching to Tharbek. Tharbek will charge at a random target, dealing physical damage to anyone in his path, knocking them back. Throughout the fight, he will throw out imbued iron axes. These are fiery, whirling weapons that will spin and move around the room, dealing fire damage to any nearby player. These need to be avoided and will cause the ranged DPS and healer to constantly be moving around the room. At 70%, he gained a buff called Iron Rage that increases his damage dealt by 50%. At 30% health, the Black Iron Guards will come to Tharbek's aid. The tank will need to pick these up. They are stunnable and can be knocked back. We found it was still best to focus down the boss at this point. So to summarize, the main goal of this fight is proper ad management. 3 waves before Tharbek joins are pretty straightforward, but properly dealing with the Sky Reaver, Tharbek, and the ads that join during the fight can quickly be overwhelming. Be sure to quickly move out of the path of the imbued iron axes and save your AoE stuns for 30% when the last set of ads join in. The trash on the way to the 4th boss will have the same mobs that you encountered earlier in the instance, with some additions to the fray. Dray Keepers will need to be CC'd or be your highest priority. They will run away to attempt to open Drake cages. Slows, roots, and stuns all work, though it didn't seem too detrimental if they did manage to release the Drakes. If Ember Scale Adolescents are released, they will cast an ability called Flame Chain. This will deal fire damage and chain to nearby enemies. This can be interrupted. They will also place fire patches at the feet of a random player. Simply sidestep out of these to avoid unnecessary damage. After killing the first pack with Drake Keepers in them, you can open the Drake cages and easily eliminate them before pulling the next group. This will prevent being overrun with mobs. Son of the Beast is an optional mini-boss that is similar to the old Beast fight. At the time of our recording, he did not have a loot table. He will charge at random players, knocking them back and leaving a flame trail on the ground. He will also cast an AoE fear on players at close range. Ground Shakers do a moving frontal smash. Tanks can simply move out of the way of this to reduce damage taken. You can see that they're about to use this ability when they lift their maces above their heads. Ragewing is the 4th boss of the instance and has very little room for movement. There will be lots of stuff on the ground to move out of, but it can be very hard to see. Throughout the fight, Ragewing will use his ability called Magma Spit. This spawns a puddle at the feet of a random player. Move out of these as soon as possible. Be sure to pay attention to your position so you are not blocking off sections of the bridge. Healers and tanks, be aware that the boss will hit the tank with an ability called Ripping Claw, causing a bleed dealing damage every 2 seconds for 20 seconds. Ragewing will also cast Engulfing Fire. This is a flame breath that begins at one end of the bridge and travels roughly 75% of the way to the other side. Everyone needs to be positioned towards the middle of the bridge in order to have enough time to move to the other end. This ability will deal a large amount of fire damage and disorients any players hit by it for 3 seconds. When Ragewing reaches 70% health, he will fly away, summoning ads, and will begin casting his ability Firestorm. This ability will deal a large amount of damage to your group. Be sure to move out of any telegraphed circles to avoid taking extra damage while also cleaving down the ads. He will fly away again at 40%. Once Ragewing returns, he will land on the platform and will gain the buff Burning Rage. This will increase his damage dealt by 10% per stack. These can be removed within rage removing abilities. We would advise using Heroism or Bloodlust in any major DPS cooldowns if you don't have a way to remove his stacks. He will no longer cast his breath or summon adds, but Ragewing will still use his ability Magma Spit, so continue to move out of any fire puddles. Overall, Ragewing is a pretty easy fight as long as you are prepared to move away from both of his fire abilities. He doesn't hit the tank too hard, and his adds aren't that difficult to kill. Just watch your feet and you should have no trouble with this boss. The trash before the final boss introduces you to some different mobs. We chose to CC the Worm Callers and focus down the Ember Scales first. The Worm Callers will cast Chain Pull, pulling a player to them and then knocking back any nearby players. Next are Flame Reavers, who will summon Wind Fury totems that need to be switched to when they are out, otherwise they didn't seem to do anything else of importance. The Ember Scales are the drakes that will cast an ability called Flame Spit. This cannot be interrupted and the drake will spit out fire in a line in front of him. The final trash pull will consist of 2 Rage Guards who will cast Shockwave, which deals physical damage and stun anyone caught in its path. Tanks will need to face these away from the group. Be aware that you can fall off the bridge leading up to the platform with the last boss. Warlord Zaela is the final boss of the instance, and she brought all of her drakes with her from Siege of Orgrimmar. Tanks and healers need to be aware of Warlord Zaela's first ability, Destructive Strike. On Heroic, this attack will deal a large amount of physical damage to the tank and will knock them backwards. Tanks need to make sure their backs are always facing the center of the platform, or they will need to position themselves next to one of the torches in the corner so the knockback does not knock them off the platform. Warlord Zaela will cast Black Iron Cyclone, where she will enter a frenzy and fixate on a random player. This ability is easily avoidable and kiteable, but be careful not to kite Zaela onto one of your party members. Your ranged DPS will need to be spread out due to her Rebounding Blade ability. Zaela will throw an axe inflicting a moderate amount of physical damage to the target, bouncing to 2 additional nearby targets. When Zaela reaches 60% health, she will retreat to the back of a nearby Proto-Drake and adds will dismount onto the platform. The surrounding Proto-Drakes will begin to position themselves one at a time along the outside of the platform and channel Burning Breath. The breath will deal a large amount of fire damage to anyone caught in the section it is facing, reaching all the way to the end of the platform. The adds will pull random targets to them, and it will also do a small knockback to any nearby players. We found that grouping up and positioning the adds in the middle of the platform made this phase of the fight much more manageable. DPS down the adds while avoiding the sections being filled with the Drake's fire breath until Zaela returns to the platform. Once Zaela is back on the platform, your space will be limited due to the drakes, so healers need to be aware of the increased damage from her Rebounding Blade, as it is more likely to hit more than one target. She will also resume fixating on random players, and you will need to continue to kite. Proper positioning will make this fight much easier. Being in a good position to kite Zaela and also move out of any Drake fire will make all the difference, as the other abilities are pretty minor in comparison. We hope you have enjoyed this video and found the information helpful to you and your group. If you're interested in more heroic dungeon guides or want to know more about our team, check out the links provided in the description below.